Hi guys, welcome to the Dark Blue. My name is Pierre Azzam. I am a psychiatrist turned professional coach for men. And tonight I'm drinking the White Marlin, which is a wit beer by Sailfish Brewing down here in Fort Pierce, Florida. Tonight's Dark Blue is all about understanding major depression. We'll invite conversations about how we men experience one of the most common and commonly misunderstood mental health conditions. Now, we can't talk about depression without making an important distinction. That is, the difference between the normal human experience of sadness and the pathologic experience of major depression. Every man, every person experiences the emotion of sadness. And if you come to next month's Dark Blue event, we'll focus attention on understanding this emotion in greater detail. On the other hand, major depression is a neuroscience-based condition that impacts a smaller subset of us. About 1 in 8 men will experience major depression over the course of our lifetimes. And many of us, myself included, believe this represents an underestimate because many of us suffer in silence. Research also suggests that under half of men who experience depression will ever seek or receive adequate treatment. That is, despite the availability of various types of treatment. For men, one of the biggest barriers to getting help is stigma. Stigma around the causes and the nature of depression, around asking for help, around being in treatment. And so tonight, you'll help to target that stigma. You'll have an invitation to share your questions and your insights around this very important topic. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you'll also have the floor to share your experience with depression, either in yourself or someone you know. And I'm happy to start. I was first diagnosed with major depression when I was 22 years old. I was in medical school and beginning my training to become a psychiatrist. And even as someone who was being taught to detect depression in other people, I had a lot of trouble identifying it in myself. And in fact, it took me about 18 months of depressive symptoms before I was willing to recognize that something wasn't right. And sadly, that's not atypical. By the book, major depression requires a change in mood and depressive symptoms that last at least 2 weeks. But on average, men with untreated depression will experience symptoms lasting 4 to 12 months. That's a really long time. And also by the book, major depression is diagnosed when someone experiences a combination of depressed mood, decreased capacity to experience or feel joy, or irritability. That's alongside a mix of at least 4 different depressive symptoms. And those symptoms include changes to sleep, guilt or diminished self-worth, decline in energy, concentration difficulties, appetite disturbances, either a gain or a loss, changes to activity level, that's either sluggishness and slowing down, or it's restlessness and hyperactivity, and finally, hopelessness, even to the point of suicidal thinking or suicidal behaviors. That, in essence, captures the typical textbook experience of major depression. But looking back, those criteria didn't exactly capture my experience. I really wasn't that sad or that tearful. I was mostly numb and angry. I felt like I couldn't do anything right, and I struggled to make simple decisions. And when I look back, I can appreciate the immense level of sadness. But in the moment, it really was a challenge for me to even articulate my emotions. I felt really numb. I walled people off. I fell behind in school and in work. And I chalked it up to personal failure. I thought I was failing as a man. And I wanted nothing more than to escape. Often that was through experiences like drinking or sex or porn or spending money I didn't have. And every time I did, I judged myself really hard. and I'd feel even more down about myself. I know now that those experiences really aren't unique to me. Scientists who study depression in men have actually identified features of what they've called male-type depression. These symptoms tend to show up more commonly in guys who experience major depression. And if you've experienced depression, some of these are likely to resonate for you. Men who experience depression are more likely to face attacks of anger, feeling depleted, numbness, and inability to cry, harsh self-criticism, difficulty making decisions, restlessness and irritability, rigid demands to be left alone, avoidance of help, and substance use or risky behaviors. Sure, many of us will be able to identify a sense of sadness or low mood. But often in the moment, in the midst of depression, it becomes harder to identify our emotions, and we may more strongly report feeling numb or feeling angry or feeling depleted than actually feeling sad. So what does all this mean? And particularly, what's it mean for men? Really, for starters, it means that our cases of treatable depression can pretty easily get missed, especially if they don't show up in the classical textbook kind of way. And keep in mind, too, that one of the biggest stigmas around depression, particularly for us men, is that we feel like we're weak if we experience it, which may mean that we're also less likely to share or name it. We men have a tendency to judge ourselves as weak if we experience depression, and depression as a weakness. Obviously, not all of us, but it's a more common stigma among men that somehow we're weak if we experience depression. And that's frankly bullshit, because there are many different contributors to major depression, anywhere from genetics to substance use to medical conditions to major losses and hardships. But nowhere on that list is personal weakness. Depression is not a character flaw. It's not a deficiency. It may be a chemical deficiency, but it's not a manliness deficiency, nor is it a deficiency in personal value. You likely already know this, especially if you're here at this event. But consider some of the implicit ways that our language choices can undermine this awareness. How often might you have heard or even said, "I don't want to take a pill or go to therapy. I want to be able to handle it on my own." Or asked, "Why is he depressed? He's got everything to be happy about." Or said, "I never thought I'd get depressed. I thought I was stronger than that." Or asked yourself, "What did I do wrong to feel depressed?" It may feel difficult to separate the depressive symptoms from a set of personal choices, strengths, or values. But to understand depression fully, we have to get used to seeing it for what it really is, a disease. And as you start tonight's dark blue discussion, we want to encourage open dialogue around this condition, major depressive disorder. We invite you to consider how we men can change the conversation around depression, and to answer the following 4 questions. 1. How have you personally differentiated between depression and sadness? What would you add to this conversation about the difference between the two? 2. How might you identify depression in a man who may be experiencing it? What might you ask him? What might you look for? 3. If you were experiencing depression and you needed help, to whom would you turn? And 4. What might keep you personally from talking to someone about depression, either in yourself or in someone else? Thank you for joining us. Cheers.